President Trump is in Japan for the second leg of his nearly week-long trip through Asia. Earlier, he met with Japan's emperor at the Imperial Palace, and in just a few hours, he'll hold talks with Japan's first female prime minister. But the White House appears laser-focused on the most consequential meeting of the trip, a pivotal sit-down with Chinese President Xi Jinping, the first of Trump's second term. Now, speaking to reporters on Air Force One, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talked up the framework for a potential trade truce with China, while President Trump made clear it's not done yet.
We have a framework for President Trump, President Xi to decide on, and we discussed a wide range of things from tariffs, trade, fentanyl, substantial purchase of U.S. agricultural products.
And rare earths.
And,
right?
rare earths.
It's most important.
But nothing has been agreed to yet.
How do you feel
But
about
we feel good. We're going to have a great talk. I have a lot of respect for President Xi. I like him a lot. He likes me a lot, I believe, and respects me, and I think he respects our country a lot. And I think we're going to have a successful transaction.
I'm joined by a terrific group of reporters here at the table. CNN's Manu, Raju, Seung Kim of the Associated Press, CNN's Isaac Dovere, and Julia Ioffe of Puck. She's also the author of a brand new book, Motherland, A Feminist History of Modern Russia from Revolution to Autocracy, which we will talk about later in the show. I'm very excited to talk to you about that. Let's start with the news of the president's trip to Asia. Seung, you cover the White House. What are you hearing from your sources about how it's going so far?
Well, what's been really interesting, well, first of all, they think this trip so far has been very successful. Obviously, his first stop was in Malaysia, where he presided over this peace deal ceremony that he has touted so often. But the real focus of this trip is his meeting with Xi Jinping. And what I found really interesting about the comments from the top trade officials and the top and Scott Bessent earlier today was that they really are laying the groundwork in a way that we don't often see from this administration. President Trump likes to kind of have these impromptu meetings, but this is kind of what happens in a standard administration. There are lots of legwork, a lot of preparatory work that goes in advance of a big meeting with the principals, and you saw that with both sides declaring a preliminary consensus on a potential trade deal. But now President Trump is President Trump, and nothing is agreed to until he meets with President Xi. And he's really, as usual, promoting his personal relationships with him to try to secure a good deal for the U.S.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because we have seen, particularly with Russia and Ukraine, and even to a lesser extent in the Mideast, the president just kind of winging it and going with his instinct. I think it's probably the most true in Russia and Ukraine. But in this particular case, he is letting his people work out ahead of time. And let's look at what we're talking about for this framework of a trade deal. Further cooperation to stem the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., China to buy substantial amounts of U.S. soybeans, China could delay export controls on rare earth minerals, and finalizing a deal to transfer TikTok ownership.
Well, I think China is a lot more complicated than Russia, and we have a lot more leverage with China, and China has a lot more leverage with us. We're much more interconnected than we are with Russia, where we cut off trade ages ago, and there's almost no trade to speak of between Russia and the U.S. And China has been playing hardball right back at President Trump, and so he's had to make some compromises, as he said, just as China, which is teetering a little bit economically, has had to as well.
And Manu, I've been wanting to read this for you because I want to get your take, since you are talking to either, I don't know if you call them China hawks still, or former China hawks, or quiet China hawks now in the Republican Party on Capitol Hill. This is from the Washington Post over the weekend. In private letters and careful public statements, Republicans are urging the administration to cleave the world's two superpowers apart, further separating their markets, protecting and accelerating critical industries like artificial intelligence, and deepening military support for Taiwan. But the months-long lobbying effort has largely failed to sway the president. When you talk to Republicans in the hallway, are they still sounding like the old Republican Party when it comes to China?
I mean, they privately, yes. Publicly, no. They don't want to break with the president, but their views on trade, on tariffs are diametrically opposed to where Trump has been. Trump has reshaped the Republican Party with protectionist policies, with the pro-tariff policy, and these Republicans, for the most part, they're free traders. They came up through the ranks of Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. They supported free trade agreements, but they're very much keeping their mouths closed as Trump is making this centerpiece of his economic policy. But it does raise the stakes politically for him for this meeting on Thursday, which is arguably the most important meeting of his second term so far, because there's so much desire among people in his party for some level of trade agreements, more trade agreements, particularly with China, because so much is riding on it, including the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I mean, there's like China hawk when it comes to national security, which, I mean, TikTok, obviously, the fact that there's going to be a deal, we'll see what it looks like, is one thing. And then there is with regard to economic issues, and that is perhaps something different.
Yeah, I think it's a question that how this plays out longer term politically is also interesting. You hear a lot of Democrats talking about how they think that going into 2028, going up against China and making that more of an issue of the opposition to China will be a prevalent theme. But obviously it depends a lot on what happens with the president, what he does over this time. Look, we have, how did you say it, a preliminary
consensus, I believe.
Right.
I don't know if it's exactly basically that.
Toward a
Yeah.
potential negotiation.
Have a framework.
When
Field
we
have a
saw,
Concepts of a plan.
But when we saw just over the weekend that Donald Trump got so annoyed about an ad that ran that he canceled negotiations with Canada. So who knows what will come of any of this?
Well, let's actually, I mean, there's a connection here, weirdly, mostly because it's a connection that that the president made. Here's what he said about that over the weekend. Canada was caught red-handed putting up a fraudulent advertisement on Ronald Reagan's speech on tariffs. Because of their serious misrepresentation of the facts and hostile act, I am increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now. So he's got this, he's angry at Canada because of this ad featuring Ronald Reagan, which was spliced, but I think the broad idea of what Reagan said all those years ago still stands, and it is pretty much represented in that ad. But that's his posture towards Canada while he's over trying to make a deal with China.
Well, I think Trump fundamentally respects force and strength. He respects strongmen. He respects people like Vladimir Putin. He just said he likes Kim Jong-un. He doesn't like the technocrats of Europe. He likes Xi Jinping. He doesn't like Mark Carney of Canada necessarily. He's kind of this soft-spoken, again, technocrat. He likes Viktor Orban of Hungary. And everything is also very personal to him. To Manu's point, and to your question about former China hawks or declawed former China hawks, everything is so personal to Donald Trump, and what he believes is what the Republican Party has to believe, because he has so personalized the Republican Party, and what he believes changes day to day. So he didn't believe in regime change, and then when Israel struck Iran, he was for regime change, and now he's maybe for regime change in Venezuela. And he didn't, he was super against China, but now he might make a deal with China. So,
but
maybe
also,
he's not
to your point, it's not the way that the executive authority of tariffs works, that the president can just decide because he feels that
we'll
way.
see what the Supreme Court says about that.
It has not to
you
date.
could say that about anything.